Before T-Rex or any dinosaur, there was something worse. A predator with saber teeth longer than your hand. Creatures so strange, they make dinosaurs look normal. And they ruled the earth for millions of years. This is the world nobody talks about. The world before dinosaurs existed. "300 million years ago, you wouldn't recognize this planet. The world looked nothing like today. Every continent you know, fused into one massive piece of land. One gigantic landmass surrounded by endless water, Pangaea. But if you were standing there, you'd call it something else, alien. Everything was wrong. The air was different, less oxygen, thicker, harder to breathe. The sky looked hazy, almost brown on some days. And the silence? Unsettling. Birds didn't exist yet. Grass hadn't appeared. Flowers were millions of years away. Just emptiness. This was Earth before any of the giants you've heard about. And it was terrifying in ways those creatures never were. The land stretched forever in every direction, one supercontinent so massive it would take you years to walk across. Rocky deserts in the center, thick swampy forests near the coasts, volcanoes spitting fire on the horizon. The ground shook constantly, not from giant footsteps, but from the planet itself, still young, still angry, still forming. And the temperature, it changed everything. The Permian period started cold. Ice covered the southern edges of Pangaea. Glaciers crept across the land. The creatures that lived here were tough. They had to be. But slowly, over millions of years, the ice began to melt. The world started warming, and as the heat rose, life exploded. Forests spread across the supercontinent. Not the forests you know. Oak trees didn't exist. Autumn leaves were millions of years away. These were ancient forests. Ferns taller than houses. Seed-bearing plants called gymnosperms that looked like something from another world. Everything was green and strange and dripping with moisture. And in those forests, things were moving. Insects first. Cockroaches the size of birds scuttled through the undergrowth. Dragonflies with wingspans wider than your arms soared between the trees. Centipedes longer than your leg crawled through the rotting leaves. The buzz of life filled the air, clicking, humming, rustling. But insects weren't the rulers here. Something else was watching from the shadows. Something bigger, something with teeth. The first great predators were waking up. Creatures that walked on four legs, low to the ground, with jaws built for killing. They weren't dinosaurs. They weren't even related to dinosaurs. They were something older, something stranger, and they were hungry. This was Pangaea at its beginning, a world of alien forests and giant insects. A world waiting for its first true kings to rise. They wouldn't have to wait long. The age of monsters was about to begin. The amphibian never saw it coming. It had crawled onto the muddy bank to warm itself in the early morning sun. Eyes half closed, body still sluggish from the cold night. One of the largest creatures in the swamp. It had survived for years in these waters. Just a few more minutes of heat, and it would slip back into the water where nothing could touch it. It never got those minutes. From the shadow of the ferns, something exploded forward, a blur of scales and muscle. Jaws opened wide, 2 rows of teeth, some sharp as knives, others flat as grinding stones. The amphibian tried to turn, tried to drag itself toward the water, but its cold body wouldn't move fast enough. One bite to the neck, a crack of bone, then silence. Dimetrodon dragged its meal into the shallows and began to feed. This was the first true king of Pangaea, a massive sail rising from its back like a flag of death, and a secret weapon that made it unstoppable. While every other creature on land was still waiting for the sun to warm their bodies, Dimetrodon was already hunting. By sunrise, the hunt was already over. The swamps belonged to this monster, the forests too, the rocky shores where amphibians came to breed, the shallow rivers where fish gathered in the thousands. Anywhere there was water and prey, Dimetrodon ruled. Nothing was safe. Giant amphibians learned to stay submerged until midday, holding their breath until their lungs burned, praying the shadow above would move on. Smaller reptiles learned to hide in burrows and climb trees where those powerful jaws couldn't follow. But hiding only delayed the inevitable. Dimetrodon was patient. It could wait for hours without moving, looking like a log, like a rock, like nothing at all, watching, listening, smelling the air for the faintest hint of blood. And the moment something made a mistake, those jaws were already closing. Now imagine waking up in this world, the sun just rising, the air still cool. You stretch, yawn, think about finding food. Everything around you is quiet, still, safe. But Dimetrodon has been awake for an hour. It watched you fall asleep last night, tracked your breathing in the darkness, counted the minutes until sunrise. And while you're still blinking the sleep from your eyes, still thinking about your first meal of the day, those teeth are already at your throat. One bite, that's all it ever took. For 30 million years, nothing challenged this creature. Generations of prey lived and died under its shadow. Entire species evolved just to avoid it. But Dimetrodon always found a way, always adapted, always fed. It had ruled since before memory, killed everything it ever wanted to kill, never feared anything. But time doesn't care about kings. Somewhere on the plains of Pangaea, something new was waking up. Something with saber teeth and a hunger that would make Dimetrodon look like prey. The first king was about to meet the last thing it would ever see. 20 million years passed, and Pangaea had changed. The swamps were drying up. The thick, humid forests near the coasts were shrinking, replaced by open plains and scattered woodlands. The air was hotter now, temperatures climbing year after year, and in this new world, a new kind of predator was rising, Gorgonopsid. If Dimetrodon was a nightmare, this creature was something worse, something built for a single purpose, killing. Think of a lion, the most feared predator in Africa, 400 pounds of muscle, teeth that can crush bone, speed that can chase down almost anything. Now make it worse. Make it bigger, 700 pounds instead of 4. Give it saber teeth 5 inches long that can punch through armor. Give it more stamina so it can chase prey for miles without slowing down. Give it eyes that track movement like a missile locks onto a target. That's Gorgonopsid. Lions are scary. Gorgonopsid would have eaten lions for breakfast. This was an ambush predator and a pursuit predator combined into one. It would stalk through the tall ferns, low and silent, watching a herd of plant eaters grazing in the distance, waiting for one to separate from the group, one to wander too far, one to let its guard down. Then the chase began. The prey would run, of course it would run, but Gorgonopsid was faster. It could maintain pursuit far longer than any predator before it. And when it finally caught up, those saber teeth would swing down like twin daggers. The kill was almost instant. Gorgonopsid ruled the late Permian for nearly 20 million years. It was the apex predator of its age. feared by everything that walked, crawled, or grazed on Pangaea. Even Dimetrodon couldn't compete. The sail-backed killers were too slow, too dependent on water. As the world dried out, they faded away, and Gorgonopsid took their place at the top of the food chain. But this saber-toothed terror wasn't alone. Pangaea was filling with life. Giant herbivores roamed the plains in herds. Armored reptiles the size of cars trundled through the forest. Strange, pig-like creatures burrowed underground to escape the heat. And in the oceans surrounding the supercontinent, ancient sharks and bizarre fish ruled waters that stretched to the horizon. The Permian world was reaching its peak, life everywhere. Predators and prey locked in an endless cycle. Gorgonopsid ruled the land, but the land was only half the world. Beyond the coastlines, stretching to every horizon, lay something even larger. An ocean so vast it made Pangaea look small. And beneath those waves, a completely different nightmare was waiting. Panthalassa, a single ocean covering 2/3 of the entire planet, so vast that Pangaea, that massive supercontinent, was just an island floating in its center. And beneath those waves, a world just as violent as the land, maybe worse. Think of the deadliest ocean predator you know. Great white shark. Orca. Now throw them away. The Permian Ocean would have swallowed them whole. The rulers here were ancient. Sharks had been swimming these waters for over 100 million years before Gorgonopsid even existed. They were perfected killing machines long before anything dangerous walked on land. Helicoprion. 25 feet of nightmare. But the strangest part wasn't its size. It was the mouth. A spiral of teeth curling out from its lower jaw like a buzz saw. Hundreds of teeth arranged in a wheel that never stopped growing. When those jaws closed on prey, the spiral spun inward, dragging flesh deeper and deeper into its throat. Just ask the squid that thought open water meant safety. One moment it was swimming. The next, Helicoprion rose from below. Silent, fast. Those spiral jaws closed like a machine. One rotation and the squid was gone. Swallowed whole before it knew it was dead. Nothing like it exists today. But Helicoprion wasn't alone. Giant sea scorpions patrolled the shallower waters. Eurypterids, 8 feet long, with claws that could crush bone. They had ruled the seas in an earlier age, and even now, millions of years past their prime, they refused to disappear. Armored, patient, waiting in the murky depths for anything foolish enough to swim too close. Deeper down, stranger things lurked. Fish with armored skulls and jaws built for crushing shells. Eel-like creatures with teeth lining their entire throats. Things that never saw sunlight but knew exactly how to kill in the darkness. The Permian Ocean was layered with death. Surface predators, mid-water hunters, bottom-dwelling ambushers. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere safe. Every depth had something waiting with open jaws. But the ocean wasn't just about killing, it was also creating. Along the coastlines of Pangaea, life was crawling out of the water. Amphibians the size of crocodiles hauled themselves onto muddy banks. Some had heads wider than a car hood, flat, powerful, built for snapping at anything that moved. They lived between two worlds, hunting fish in the shallows, hunting land creatures near the shore, masters of the in-between. And in the tidal pools, something incredible was happening. Fish were changing. Their fins were growing stronger, thicker. Some could push themselves across mud and sand for short distances. They didn't know it yet, but they were taking the first steps toward becoming something new. something that would one day walk, one day run, one day rule the land. The ocean was a factory of evolution, experimenting, testing, killing the failures, and rewarding the survivors. For millions of years, this system worked. Land and sea, predators and prey, life everywhere, filling every corner of the planet. But underneath, the ocean was suffocating. Something was wrong with the planet itself. Deep beneath Pangaea, pressure was building. Cracks were forming in the Earth's crust. Heat was rising from below, warming the seas, poisoning the water. On land, Gorgonopsids still hunted. In the ocean, sharks still ruled. Life had no idea what was coming. The Earth was about to tear itself apart. It started with fire. Deep in what is now Siberia, the Earth cracked open. Not a single volcano, not a chain of mountains spitting ash. Something far worse. A wound in the planet itself. Thousands of miles wide, pouring lava across the land for thousands of years. The Siberian traps. Imagine a flood of molten rock covering an area larger than Europe, rivers of fire stretching to the horizon in every direction, the ground glowing red for as far as any eye could see, and it didn't stop. It kept erupting, month after month, year after year, century after century. But the lava wasn't the killer, the poison was. As the eruptions continued, billions of tons of gas poured into the sky. Carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur. The atmosphere turned toxic. The air became harder to breathe. And the temperature? It started climbing, fast. On the plains of Pangaea, Gorgonopsid felt it first. The heat, the heaviness in the air. Prey was harder to find. The herds were smaller. The forests were dying. Something was wrong. But there was nothing to fight. For the first time in 20 million years, the apex predator was helpless. The plants died first. Without stable temperatures, without clean air, forests that had stood for millions of years withered and collapsed. Then the herbivores. With nothing to eat, they starved. Entire species vanished in generations. And then the predators. One by one, they lay down in the ash and never got back up. The land was dying, but the ocean had it worse. Remember the water warming from below? It wasn't just warming anymore, it was cooking. The oxygen was disappearing. Fish that had swam these seas for hundreds of millions of years suddenly couldn't breathe. Helicoprion, that nightmare with the spiral jaw, thrashed in waters that were slowly suffocating it. The giant sea scorpion sank to the bottom and never moved again. The ancient sharks that had survived everything, they floated to the surface, dead. The ocean turned into a graveyard. 96% of all marine species gone. On land, 70% of everything that walked, crawled, or flew gone. This was the Great Dying, the worst mass extinction in Earth's history. Worse than the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. Worse than anything before or since. It took nearly 1 million years for the dying to stop. 1 million years of fire, poison, heat, and death. When it was finally over, the planet was silent. The forests were ash. The oceans were empty. Pangaea, that supercontinent teeming with life, was a wasteland. 90% of all life on Earth wiped out. But not everything died. Deep in burrows, small creatures survived. Lystrosaurus, a pig-like animal no bigger than a dog, had dug itself underground when the air turned poison. It stayed there for months, maybe years, waiting for a world that might never come back. But it did come back, slowly, painfully, one species at a time. Lystrosaurus crawled out of its burrow into a world it didn't recognize. Just empty land stretching to the horizon. Silence, where there used to be life. But that silence didn't last. In the streams and rivers, fish were still swimming. In the mud, insects were still crawling. In the few patches of green that remained, plants were starting to grow again. Life, stubborn, relentless, refusing to quit, was finding a way. And in that emptiness, in that silent world of ash and death, something new was stirring. Small at first, but give them time, give them millions of years, and they would become something the world had never seen before. The dinosaurs were coming, and they would rule for the next 160 million years.